Hej DanishTuber, velkommen, godmorgen, god eftermiddag, god aften, hvor end du er. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this webinar on Danish Numbers Mastery. An introduction to unlocking the world of Danish numerals. I'm really happy to be doing this. I'm really happy that you joined me, and let me know in the chat box if you're here. Don't be shy. You can write anything in the chat if you have any questions. There's also a Q&A section at the end, so feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat box. Well, I'm going to keep it as short and sweet as possible because we all have things to get on with, and this is basically just going to be a super, hopefully effective, productive way to start getting control of these numbers in Danish. And I guess the first question is why? Why even do this webinar? Well, Danish, like any other language, has its challenges. But what I notice in my classes is that it doesn't matter how advanced somebody gets. Numbers is something that is just particularly annoying. And it might be specifically with Danish, but it might be with other languages as well. But we're going to hopefully delve into some of the secrets, share with you some of my experiences, and go through what I think are some pretty powerful tools that can help you to remember Danish numbers. I won't say effortlessly, but with a little work, you can hopefully get them under control. So let's kick it off with, well, why even do we need to know the numbers? Of course, I'm not going to insult your intelligence, right? But we have the time, we have the dates, we have birthdays, we have the years. There are so many, the years, as in what year is it? There's so many cases where I'm reading articles with people and the numbers comes up and they're reading everything fluidly, really nice, and then the number comes and they freeze. And it's like, oh my God, what happened here? So it's pretty obvious why. Okay, so I don't think we need to spend any more time talking about the why. But the most important question is, how the hell are we supposed to remember these numbers? Well, there's a few different methods that I've come across, and the most basic thing that I always do in my classes is this number drills. And I guess this is what's known as chunking. Chunking, which makes me feel hungry. I don't know why. This is like when you take it in parts, right? Don't try to swallow the entire thing in one. Take it one step at a time. And let me reshare my screen here because I've prepared a little whiteboard for us where I can give you an example. I'm not going to go through all of the numbers because I'm sure that you're familiar with at least the lower numbers. But I'm just going to show you what I do in my classes and what I find seems to work. So hopefully you can see my whiteboard now. Let me know in the chat if you cannot for any reason. But this is what I would do in class, for example. First time, okay, we're going to go through some numbers. Let's start right at the top. You repeat after me. And as you watch this, you can also repeat to yourself. So I would say 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. From the top. 1, 2, 3. Right? You might be confident with these numbers, right? So it's pretty easy. 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6. Now from the top again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we just continue like this. 7, 8, 9. I generally do it in threes. That's just what I feel like seems to work. 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9. And lastly, we have T. So we have one left over. Now I can take it from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7, 8, 9. T. And maybe you're confident with 1, 2, 3, but not so much with 7, 8, 9. So that's where you can start drilling that in just whatever way. 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9. All right. And the next step after that is to start doing it at random. So you could do this exercise, open up a whiteboard and do it yourself. Now I'm going to write a random number. What is this number in Danish? I can't hear you, but I hope you're all shouting 6. 6. 7. 3. 9. So then you just progress. using the same technique. Now we go from 11 through to 20. 11, 12, 13. 11, 12, 13. 11, 12, 13. 14, 15, 16. 14, 15, 16. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Go all the way up to 20, do the exact same thing, then do them at random. Test yourself. Oh, 13. 19. 14. 12. Right, so the majority of people that I meet, when they come to me in class, they've pretty much already got a good foundation with 1 to 20. Everybody tells me the same. It's when I get to 30, 40, 50, and so on. That's when I start like tearing my hair out. If you're lucky enough to have hair, I don't have any anymore. So that part of me is already gone. Whatever. So now you just do the same drill, right? So now I can start with 20 maybe. 20, 12, 40. 20, 12, 40. Helt 60, 70. 50, 60, 70. And then from the top again. 20, 12, 40, 50, 60, 70. So you're drilling it in this way. You're doing it in chunks. You're not taking everything in one, because if you try to go from 20 through to 100 or through to 1000, maybe it's going to be too much for you at the start. So just take it in threes, take it in twos, whatever works. And then again, test yourself at random. So if I write this, ability potens. Helfias. Bura. Fias. Taliban. Now, the reason these numbers are particularly difficult to remember is because, I don't know, it's like the way you write them is not necessarily how you might think you pronounce them. That is one thing. And also the meanings behind the words are a bit weird. But you don't need to worry about that. You just need to remember how to pronounce them. There's one little pattern that I've always noticed, and that is, again, and it's a part of this chunking technique, where if you can remember 20, 12, 12, or 40, then when you get to 50, you have a little pattern here. You have you have hel tres. If you take away the hel, you're then left with tres. Then we have hel fies. If you take away the hel, you're then left with fies. And they're not exactly the same words. There's a bit of difference, but they're close enough. So if I write them out as well, hel tres, take away the hel, the next one is tres. So this needs an S. Yeah, it's a silent D. That's what I was saying. The way you write them and the way you say them can be a bit annoying. But whatever. It's just a memory game. Tres. Then we have hel fies. Like this. And again, take away the hel, you're left with fies. Again, they're not exactly the same sound, but they're pretty close. The difference in pronunciation there, in my mind, 70 hel fias. It sounds like fi, yes. It sounds like you have the word as on the end. Could help you remember. And then fierce sounds a bit like the English word fierce. Fierce. Hel fias or fierce. So those middle four numbers are usually the ones that annoy the hell out of people. So that's just one way you can remember those middle. Chunk those middle four, and just then after, all you need to remember now is hel femps and huno, 90 and 100, and you've sort of mastered those numbers between those. Hel femps being 90, and huno, 100. Cool. Let's go back to my document here. Let me change the screen. And we'll go on to another system. So, the challenge of remembering. I guess that is because of they don't sit so well with the English equivalents. And that's often the case that makes some things difficult to remember. There's many cases in Danish where the English and Danish fit quite nicely together. Unfortunately, there's many others where they just don't. So you have to do these kind of drills in order to remember them. So let's go on to another technique, which you might have heard of. This is called the memory palace. Have you heard about the memory palace? Let me know in the chat box if you've used this technique before. It's basically like you're taking a mental stroll through your favorite place, whether it's your cozy home or it's like a bustling street somewhere that you know. Like each nook and cranny becomes a repository for, in this case, Danish numbers, but you can use it for anything that you need to remember. So it's kind of like turning your imagination into a memory powerhouse, if you like. You're using your imagination and it's helping you to remember specifics. So this is our memory palace. And here could be an example, right? Number 10 in Danish is tea. Sounds pretty much like tea, what you drink. So if your memory palace is, for example, let's say your house, the way when you go into your house, you have rooms that you enter in a set order, right? So if you're having difficulty remembering from 10 through to 20, you can start to place things in these rooms and you know the order of those things. For example, and the more ridiculous the image is in your mind, the easier it's going to be for you to remember it. So I've put here a huge cup of tea. So I imagine I go into my house, the first room, tea. Wow, there's a massive cup of tea. And in the next room, it doesn't even have to be a next room. It could just be like another area in that room. Like the next thing I see is the sofa. And on my sofa is a tiny, tiny, tiny little elephant. Elephant and elephant. In my mind, sound pretty close. Elephant. So again, this is the images that come into my mind. You shouldn't be using mine. You have to use your own, because things that make sense for me don't make sense for you. Most likely, that's often the case in my life. So another example could be a bus route that you always take, or a car trip that you always take, and it could be the streets, it could be the names of the stops, could be anything like that, but they're in a specific order, and you can use this imagery to bring the numbers back in, right? That's sort of the basic idea of it. Have you heard about this method? Let me know in the chat if you've heard about it or you've used it before. Assuming you can write in the chat, I believe you can. Let me see here. Yeah, here's another example. The word, or the number rather, 30 is 12. 12. And again, this is an example that works in my mind. 12, 12, 100. Tals. Have you heard of the word tals? It's like when something's bad. Oh, this is a tals. And in this context, this hund, this dog, he's pretty tals. He looks pretty mean, looks pretty bad. I don't want to meet him. So I could be picturing talshunde, talshunde at some kind of stop, room, whatever it is that I'm using as my memory palace to recall this number, the word 12. And sometimes you can relate the words to English words. Sometimes it's difficult. In many cases, I relate them to other Danish words that I already know. For example, the number 40 is fyre, but the word fyre is to fire. You fire somebody from their job. Fyre. Jeg fyrer 40 men. Det ved jeg ikke. So imagine firing 40 men. So the next room in your house, you open the door, and there's 40 guys all being fired together. It's a pretty ridiculous image to see 40 men all going out with their box, sad like this guy. But again, it's sort of an extreme imagination and way to recall these numbers. It's effective. It really does work. Many people that have great memories, they're actually doing it through specific techniques. It's not usually a natural thing, I believe. So method 3, that was number 2. So we've had chunking, we have had this memory palace, build your memory palace. I think my garden is a good example, because I can imagine leaving going out of my back door, or it's rather my front door really, into my garden. And there's some very specific areas of my garden, sort of like separated quite well. So again, probably these numbers from 20 through to 100, I could put them in the certain areas of my garden. And when I need to recall them, or what is area number 3, which is of course connected to 30, number 3, and recall it that way. The next one is simply mnemonics, and that is where we are matching stuff, right? So it's like not so much this memorization, but it's also a creativity, it's visualization. And I've have a box of matches here, for example. So you might think, what is mnemonics? It is matching, and that's why I've used this image of matches, because I can think of that in my brain as well. It's also an image. And so you sort of start to connect the visualization of an item, and it could be, let's see, for example, I have a list here. In, or number in. You could picture an envelope. It has the word in at the start of it, with number 1 written on it. So you could imagine 2 people holding hands. Tre, the word number 3, or rather the number 3, is pronounced exactly the same as the word for a tree. Tre, trea, tre. So you see where I'm going with this, right? Fire is written fire, but it's pronounced fear. But you could imagine some flickering flames around the number 4, fear, and so on and so on. Fem, 5 is of course associated with fingers. Fem finger. 6, I have written here 6 eggs in a carton. It was an obvious choice, but sex is also pronounced exactly the same as the word sex. So wherever your mind goes with that, let it go. If it helps you to remember, fine. Sue, swans. I don't know. Whatever works in your mind. Okay, so it's this association game. Knee. I'm skipping the order, but I'm going on to knee, whatever. Associate 9 with a knight. Knee, wearing armor, holding a sword. T, 10. 10 toes, for example. Wiggling happily. I don't know if that will help you remember, but again, it's about using your own sort of images. Can't find the right words. Your own images from your own mind. I wanted to go forward to this, which is a great example, because it often comes up in one of my classes. It's not a number, but it's rather the word here. Does anyone know what this is? Let me know if you have seen this noun before. The white part, the part that the guy's sitting in. This is called itbelka. Itbelka. And in my mind, the word car at the end sounds very much like car in English. So a very simple way to remember it is imagining sitting in a bathtub, driving the car, which is itbelka. Now we have a bath car. Itbelka, which I think is a really perfect example of this mnemonic method. It's arguably a little trickier with numbers, because if I just scroll back here to, I had 2 numbers written on the previous slide, halvtreds, halvfems. I mean, how or what would you picture with these 2 words, halvtreds? What sort of images come to your mind when you hear that sound, halvtreds? You can try to relate it to your native language. If it was, for example, English, I don't know, hell sounds a bit like hell, like Satan, fire, and hell, and all that stuff. And tres, I don't know, tres. I really haven't thought of one for this yet. So you could also see that means you do need to spend a little bit of time and be creative and think it through a little bit. I can't freaking remember how to say 50 in Danish. It's annoying the hell out of me. What can I do to remember it? Yeah, that's basically method number 3, mnemonics, using your imagination. So we've had the chunking, the memory palace, and mnemonics. The last one is simply just repetition. Repetition. And there's some other specific examples that I like to use and to do in my life, which is how do I get numbers into my everyday life without it feeling like I need to sit down and study? Because that can also be a challenge. So one thing I advise is counting steps, for example, and start at the simple numbers if that's where you are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once you're comfortable with them, go through 11 to 20 again. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and so on. When you're super confident with them, take it from 20 up to 100, 20, 30, 20, 30, 40, 30, 30, 40, 100. And the reason this exercise is so good is because it forces your brain to act quickly. Because if you don't start to try and speed up, you're going to be stalling on the steps, sort of walking up them at a very, very slow pace. And people might be looking at you like, what the hell are you doing, man? Get out of my way. Another good example is training. If you exercise, do anything with reps, for example, jumping rope, start to count your reps in Danish. Same thing. Start with the easy numbers that you are, the lower numbers. If you're comfortable with those, take the higher numbers, and then start to fill in the gaps. You also can practice, right, from 20 through to 30. 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Of course, the numbers are not so nice to say because they're quite long. So when you start saying 150, 250, 51, 52, 53, it's like, there's a lot of tests as well. So to be honest, when I'm jumping rope, I usually count it in tens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I count up and I say 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. And so on. Keep going up through like that. So let me know, get in touch. Do you have any other methods, any other things that you have been using? Repetition is the age-old method of practice makes perfect. It's just like consistency, repetition, dedication, and you sort of start to cement these numbers into your long-term memory. So with a combination of when you're first like really struggling to remember those words, do some memory palace things, do some other kind of methods that can help you to remember. Very literal things. Anytime you use money, when you're in the supermarket, for example, it's a great opportunity to hear some numbers because they always ask you, or they tell you rather, what the price is. So pay attention, right? It's very easy to be a bit passive, like, oh, fuck, just take my money, or I'll just pay with my card, I don't need to listen to what they're saying. But if you pay a bit of attention, you force yourself to, you have a learning opportunity to force yourself. I had to do it here in Argentina where I am right now, because when I first came, I was like going into the kiosk and they'd be like, I don't know, tell me how much it was. And I'd be, take my money. Luckily, most people were pretty nice to me and said, oh no, you've given me too much, or here's some back. But you can also really fuck up, right? Because I've had a guy deliver pizza to me, and I think it was the difference in Spanish between 100, 100, and siete, 700. And I'm pretty sure I thought he'd said siete, like 700 or something. Long story short, I gave the guy a big tip and he went away very happy. He expressed his appreciation to me like, oh, thanks so much, thanks a lot. And I was thinking, I'm just paying you for what you're giving me. But I came inside the house and then realized, oh, what the hell? I've given him like 600 extra. Yeah, in reality, it's not a lot of money. But it was just funny that I had that thing with, I could not understand the difference between the two numbers. So, well, that's just how it goes. So, in short, that is some number drills, new methods you can use to get better at numbers in Danish. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat box, drop them in the Q&A section. You can find that underneath. There's sort of an icon with some different shapes, so you should be able to find it in there. But it could also be that it's not set up, because I know I haven't heard from any of you in the chat box, so it's very likely that there's an error with the setup, but that's no problem. Otherwise, yeah, here's our upsumming, little summary: chunking, memory palace, mnemonics, and reps. If you do all 4 of these things, you're going to be conquering the numbers in no time. I have a last little thing to reveal to you today, and that is that I finally finished my brand new ebook. It's now available as an ebook, but it will later this week also be available as paperback. But right now you get 30% off on my website. So it's going pretty cheap right now, but it's only going to be for this week. So go over to my website and I'm going to give you the link in the chat if you want to check it out. As you can see here, it's reduced to 157. Here's the link for you. Check it out in the chat. And basically in this is an all-in-one, I've called it the Bible because it should be your go-to guide whenever you need to get a quick answer when you're like, oh, what was that grammar thing in Danish? I can't remember what word order should be in these kind of sentences, or what is it you do with adjectives? This book sort of contains all of those very basic things. And there's also some things around numbers, for example, the dates, telling the time, or that kinds of thing. And it's going to be an ongoing project of mine where I'm going to keep updating this Bible probably every year, a couple of times per year. So it's kept very up to date, and it's sort of your go-to guide. I'm really, really happy and excited to share with you. So you can see it on my website. You can also see it on Amazon. Go ahead and check it out. Otherwise, tusind tak for i dag. Tusind tak fordi I kom. Det gik faktisk meget hurtigt, men det er også fint. Så kan vi bare komme videre. That's also cool. We could just move on, put these things into practice, and hopefully get good at Danish numbers. So, held og lykke, good luck, og vi ses i den næste. See you in the next one. Hej hej.